She did not cry when she deleted his number. She had expected to. She had been preparing for that moment for 2 years, rehearsing the grief, bracing for the collapse, telling herself she was not ready, telling herself she needed more time, telling herself that one more conversation might be the one that finally changed something. But when the moment came, her hands were steady. And what she felt, sitting in her car in a parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon, was not grief. It was something she had forgotten the texture of. Quiet. Just quiet. If you have someone in your life right now who drains you, who takes without returning, who destabilizes without meaning to, or perhaps meaning to very precisely, then you already know the exhaustion she felt before that Tuesday. And you may be telling yourself the same things she told herself for 2 years. That you need more time. That one more conversation might change something. That letting go means failing the relationship or failing them, or failing some version of yourself that still believes people can be different if you love them correctly. The Stoics had something to say about all of that, and it was not gentle. Stay with me. If you are someone who has been holding on longer than you should, and somewhere inside you already know it, subscribe to this channel. Every week, we explore Stoic wisdom through real stories that help you build the kind of inner strength that makes decisions like this not only possible, but clear. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. 1. The weight you stopped noticing. Here is the first thing the Stoics understood about draining relationships that most people spend years figuring out the hard way. The weight becomes normal. Not because it gets lighter, because you get used to carrying it. And once something becomes normal, it becomes invisible. And once it becomes invisible, you stop asking whether you should be carrying it at all. Imagine a man named Edward. He is 56 years old, a civil engineer in Portland, who has spent 30 years solving problems that require precision, patience, and the ability to see structures clearly, even when they are buried under complexity. He applies none of those skills to his friendship with Daniel. Daniel has been Edward's closest friend since college, 32 years, the kind of friendship that has its own mythology, shared history, inside references, the particular shorthand of two people who have known each other long enough to stop explaining context. And for most of those 32 years, the friendship worked. But somewhere in the last decade, Edward cannot name the exact moment, which is itself part of the problem. The balance shifted. Daniel calls when he is in crisis, which is often, and Edward answers, which is always. The calls last between 45 minutes and 2 hours. They cover Daniel's marriage, his career, his health, his finances, his relationships with his children, his sense that the world has not given him what he deserves. Edward listens. Edward advises. Edward follows up. Daniel does not ask about Edward, not never, occasionally, briefly, as a formality before returning to the main subject, but not really. And Edward has told himself for a decade that this is what friendship looks like between two people at different points in their lives. That Daniel is going through something, that the balance will return when things stabilize, things have not stabilized. Here is the question the Stoics would ask Edward, and they would not soften it. How long are you willing to call a drain a friendship? Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, not as advice for others, but as a confrontation with himself. Confine yourself to the present, not the history, not the 32 years of mythology, not the version of Daniel that existed before the weight became invisible. The present. In the present, Edward hangs up every call feeling emptier than when it started. In the present, he feels a familiar dread when Daniel's name appears on his phone. In the present, he has started letting calls go to voicemail and then feeling guilty about it, which costs him energy he does not have. That dread is information. And this is the pattern interrupt the Stoics force. Your body knows before your mind admits it. The dread is not a character flaw. It is not ingratitude for a long friendship. It is your nervous system accurately reporting the condition of a relationship that has become one-directional. Edward eventually sat with a question he had been avoiding for a decade. Not, how do I fix Daniel? Not, how do I save this friendship? But, what is this friendship actually costing me? And when he answered it honestly, hours per month, emotional reserves he was not replenishing, the specific quality of depletion that comes from giving without receiving, the number was larger than he had allowed himself to see. He had not noticed the weight because he had been carrying it for so long. The first step is simply this: notice it. Name it clearly, without the distortion of guilt or history or the mythology of what the relationship used to be. What is it costing you? Answer honestly, because the answer to that question is where everything else begins. And what comes next, the principle underneath Edward's story, is something Epictetus said that will reframe every draining relationship in your life. We will get there in 60 seconds. But first, I need to tell you about a woman who did something most people are too afraid to do. She asked for the relationship back, not from the person draining her, from herself. 2. Reclaim yourself before you lose the map. Epictetus wrote something that sounds almost too simple until you feel the full weight of it. Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourself. Most people read that as a meditation on self-sufficiency. It is actually a warning. When you spend years giving your best energy to someone who cannot or will not return it, your sense of where the good actually lives begins to migrate. You start measuring your worth by whether they are okay. You start orienting your days around their needs. You start losing the internal map that tells you who you are when you're not managing someone else's crisis. And one day you reach for that map, and it is not where you left it. Imagine a woman named Patricia, not a gentlewoman, not someone you would describe as a pushover, who spent 6 years in a friendship that redefined that experience for her entirely. Patricia is 49. She runs a marketing consultancy. She is sharp, direct, and the kind of person who can read a room and a spreadsheet with equal precision. She does not miss things, except she missed this. Her friend, a woman she had known since their children were in the same kindergarten class, was what Patricia eventually came to think of as emotionally adhesive. Not cruel, not malicious, but bottomless in a way that Patricia did not identify until the 6th year, because the process was so gradual. It started with availability. Patricia was available for this friend in ways that felt natural: coffee, calls, the occasional crisis. That is what friendship is. But the requests expanded to fill every unit of space Patricia offered. An hour became 2. A phone call became a standing daily check-in. A crisis became a permanent condition that required Patricia's ongoing management. And Patricia, who could identify a scope creep problem in a client relationship within 30 days, did not identify it in this friendship for 6 years. Why? Because the friend was not taking, she was receiving. And Patricia had been raised in the way that many people are raised, to believe that giving is always virtuous, and that the exhaustion you feel from giving too much is a personal failing rather than an accurate signal. Here is the pattern interrupt. Generosity without limits is not a virtue. It is a boundary problem dressed in the language of kindness. The Stoics were not sentimental about this. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, in the plainest language he ever used on the subject, "Vindicate tibi," reclaim yourself for yourself, not your time, not your energy, not your calendar or your emotional bandwidth or your sleep, yourself. Because the thing that draining relationships ultimately take, if you let them run long enough, is not your hours. It is your sense of who you are when you're not in service to someone else's need. Patricia realized this on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. She was sitting at her desk, trying to focus on a project that required her full attention, and she found that she could not access herself in the way she needed to. Her mind kept drifting to her friend, what she needed, whether she was okay, whether Patricia had done enough that week. And Patricia thought, when did I start living in her life instead of mine? That question was the beginning of everything, not a confrontation, not an ending, not yet, but a reckoning. Patricia began, slowly and with considerable guilt, to reduce the availability. The daily check-in became every few days, the calls got shorter. She stopped offering solutions and started offering presence, a different kind of support that required less of her, and ultimately served her friend more honestly. because it stopped reinforcing the belief that her friend's problems required Patricia's management to be solved. Her friend noticed there was friction. There were hurt feelings expressed with the particular eloquence of someone who had come to depend on a level of access they were about to lose. Patricia held the reduction anyway, not coldly, with love and without apology. And here is what she found on the other side of that friction, the thing she had not expected. She could think again. The mental space that had been occupied by her friend's needs, the constant low-level hum of someone else's crisis running in the background of her own life, had cleared. And in that clearing, she found something she had not looked for in years: herself. That is what Epictetus meant by seeking the good in yourself rather than in external things. The good, your clarity, your creativity, your sense of direction, your capacity for genuine joy, lives inside you. But draining relationships build over it, layer by layer, until you have to excavate to find it. Patricia excavated. It took longer than she expected and cost more than she wanted to pay, but what she found underneath was worth every bit of the digging. Now, I need to tell you about the hardest version of this story, the one where the draining person is not a friend or a colleague, the one where they are family. And the Stoics had something to say about that too. Something that most people are not ready to hear. You will be ready in about 2 minutes. 3. The hardest let go. This is the one nobody wants to talk about, because it is easy, or at least easier, to let go of a friend. Friends are chosen. The mythology of friendship does not carry the same biological and cultural weight as the mythology of family. But what do you do when the person draining you shares your blood? What do you do when the relationship is not chosen but inherited? A parent, a sibling, an adult child, and the social, moral, and psychological cost of reducing or ending it feels categorically different from ending a friendship. The Stoics did not look away from this question, and their answer is uncomfortable. Imagine a man named Robert. He is 58 years old, the same Robert from our earlier video, you may remember him, but today we are going deeper into his story than we went before. Robert has a brother. His brother is 7 years older, and for most of Robert's life, that age gap translated into a hierarchy that Robert accepted without examining, because he was too young to examine it when it was established, and by the time he was old enough to question it, it had become the architecture of their relationship. His brother is not malicious. Robert will say that clearly and means it. But his brother is a drain in the precise way that family drains are most effective. Not through cruelty, but through need. Through the assumption, never stated but always present, that Robert's resources, financial, emotional, practical, are available to the family system in a way that his brothers are not. When their mother was ill, Robert managed it. When his brother's marriage struggled, Robert was the confidant. When his brother's business failed, Robert was the source of both advice and eventually money. None of this was demanded. It was simply assumed. And Robert, who is a man of considerable emotional intelligence, allowed the assumption for years because questioning it felt like a betrayal of something larger than the individual dynamic. Questioning it felt like questioning family itself. Here is what Marcus Aurelius wrote about family, specifically about the people in our lives whose behavior we cannot control and from whom we cannot simply walk away. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial, but I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. He wrote this as preparation, as a daily inoculation against the shock of being disappointed by people he loved. He was not recommending coldness, he was recommending clarity. See the person as they actually are, not as the mythology of the relationship has constructed them, not as the role requires them to be, as they actually are, in the present, in the pattern. Robert saw his brother clearly for the first time at 61 years old, at a family gathering where his brother made a comment, casual, unrehearsed, the kind of thing you say when you have never had to consider the cost, that revealed the full architecture of the assumption. He assumed Robert would always be there. He had never questioned it because he had never needed to. And Robert thought, he has never needed to because I have never made him. That was the moment, not dramatic, not loud, just clear. Robert did not end the relationship. That is not always the right answer, and it is especially rarely the right answer with family, where the severing costs more than the drain. But he ended the assumption. He began saying no to specific requests, not all of them, but the ones that cost him most and served his brother least. He stopped being the default manager of family difficulty. He started letting his brother sit with problems long enough to develop his own relationship with solving them. His brother was confused, then hurt, then slowly something else. More capable, not transformed, not suddenly self-sufficient in a way he had never been, but more capable than Robert had allowed him to be, because Robert's availability had for decades removed the necessity of his brother developing that capacity himself. Epictetus wrote, in the bluntest formulation of this principle, if someone is not doing you good, they may still not deserve your harm, but they may need your distance. Your distance, not your punishment, not your condemnation, not the dramatic gesture of the final conversation. Your distance, enough space for the dynamic to shift, enough space for you to stop being the load-bearing wall in a structure that should have been holding itself up years ago. Here is the third principle, and it is the hardest one. Letting go of family does not always mean leaving. Sometimes it means withdrawing the assumption, ending the arrangement that was never agreed to but has been running for decades, allowing the relationship to find a new level, lower perhaps than what it was, but real, based on what is actually there rather than on what you have been supplying to keep it functional. That is not betrayal, that is honesty. And honesty in the Stoic tradition is always the foundation of genuine love. We are almost at the final episode, but before we get there, I need to tell you the thing nobody tells you about letting go, the thing that happens after, because most people are so focused on the cost of releasing what drains them that they never think about what fills the space when it's gone. It is not what you expect, and it is the reason the Stoics called this not a loss, but an arrival. For what fills the space? Here is what nobody tells you about letting go of the people who drain you. The space they leave is not empty. You expect it to be. You have been so occupied by their presence, by the management, the navigation, the emotional labor of maintaining a relationship that costs more than it gives, that you assume their absence will feel like a void. It does not feel like a void. It feels like oxygen. Seneca wrote to Lucilius in one of his most personal letters, "Recede into ipsa quantum potes." Withdraw into yourself as much as you can, not as isolation, not as retreat from the world, as return. As the rediscovery of the interior life that draining relationships slowly colonize until you cannot remember what it felt like before they arrived. Imagine a woman named Vivienne. She is 52 years old, a high school music teacher in Nashville whose entire life has been organized around her capacity to hear things, to listen, to find what is underneath what is being played and respond to it. For 11 years, she listened to her sister. Her sister is not a bad person. Vivienne will say this clearly and with conviction. But her sister is someone who has never learned to sit with difficulty, who has always needed someone to hold the weight of her life for her while she figures out how to pick it back up. And Vivienne was that person. For 11 years. The calls came late. The crises arrived without warning and resolved without acknowledgement. The emotional labor was so thoroughly normalized that Vivienne stopped experiencing it as labor. It was simply the texture of having a sister. Until the morning she woke up and could not hear music the way she used to. Not literally. Her hearing was fine. But the interior space where music had always lived, the quiet, attentive, receptive part of herself that had been the foundation of her professional life and her private joy, was occupied by her sister's voice, by the next call, by the anticipatory management of whatever was coming next. She had lost the quiet, and without the quiet she could not hear. Vivienne made a decision that took her 4 months to make and 30 seconds to enact. She called her sister and told her, with love and without apology, that she needed to change how they related to each other, that she could not continue to be the primary container for her sister's emotional life, that she loved her and wanted to maintain a relationship, but a different one with different terms. Her sister cried. Vivian expected that. Her sister said she felt abandoned. Vivian had prepared for that too. What she had not prepared for was the silence on the other end of the call after she held her position, calmly, without retreating for the full length of the discomfort, and her sister finally said, "I didn't know I was doing that to you." That sentence cracked something open. Not because it resolved everything. It did not. The relationship took 18 months to find its new level, and that level is quieter and less frequent than what came before. But it is real, and the interior space that cleared when the weight lifted, Vivian described it as coming home to a room she had not been inside for years. The music came back, not all at once, gradually, the way light comes back into a room when you open a window that has been closed for too long. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that becomes vivid when you have experienced this. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. His own soul, not a different city, not a different life. The interior space that draining relationships slowly fill until you forget it was ever unoccupied. What fills the space when they go is not emptiness, it is you, the actual you, the one that existed before the drain, the one that knows what it wants, hears what it loves, thinks its own thoughts without another voice running underneath them. That is what is waiting on the other side of this, and it is worth every uncomfortable conversation, every held boundary, every moment of sitting inside the discomfort of a relationship, finding its new level. The space that opens is yours. Fill it with what is actually yours. One episode left, and it is the one that ties everything together, the principle that makes all four of the others possible, the one the Stoics called the only real freedom. 5. The only real freedom. We have been building toward this. 5 stories, 4 principles, 1 thread running through all of them. And the thread is this. Every person we have talked about today, Edward, Patricia, Robert, Vivian, made a version of the same discovery. That the freedom they were looking for was never in the other person's behavior. It was in their own decision. And this is the principle that the Stoics returned to more than any other. The one that sits at the foundation of everything Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, and Cato the Younger built their lives around. The dichotomy of control. You cannot control what other people take from you if you keep offering it. You cannot control whether someone is capable of reciprocity, whether they see the weight they place on you, whether they will change if given enough time, enough space, enough love, enough clear and loving conversation. You cannot control any of that. What you control is the offering. What you control is what you make available, at what cost, to whom. And that control, that single, narrow, absolute sovereignty over your own offering, is the only freedom that cannot be taken from you. Epictetus spent his life demonstrating this. Born into slavery, physically abused, stripped of every external freedom available to a human being. And yet, he wrote, with the authority of a man who had tested this from the inside, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Master of himself, not master of his circumstances, not master of the people around him, not master of what others demanded or assumed or expected, master of himself, the offering, the response, the standard, the decision about what to carry and what to set down. That is the only mastery available to any of us. And here is what that mastery looks like in practice, in the specific, ordinary, daily practice of letting go of people who drain you. It does not look like a confrontation. It does not look like a dramatic speech or a final conversation or a door closed loudly enough to be heard. It looks like Edward, sitting with the honest answer to the question, what is this actually costing me? It looks like Patricia, withdrawing availability in increments small enough to be kind and firm enough to be real. It looks like Robert, ending the assumption without ending the relationship, holding his ground inside the family structure without burning the structure down. It looks like Vivian, making a call she had been avoiding for 4 months and holding her position for the full length of the discomfort. It looks like a decision, made quietly, without drama. Not anymore. Or, not like this. Or, I love you, and these are the terms on which I can continue. Whatever the specific words, underneath them is the same thing. A person who has looked honestly at what they are carrying, decided what is worth carrying and what is not, and exercised the only freedom that was ever actually theirs. Marcus Aurelius wrote near the end of his Meditations, in the tone of a man who had governed an empire, and concluded that the only territory worth governing was the one inside. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Realize this. Not believe it as a concept. Realize it. Make it real in the specific and concrete circumstances of your actual life, in the relationship that drains you, in the person whose name came to mind before you even finished the title of this video, in the decision you have been circling for months or years, telling yourself you need more time, that one more conversation might change something, that letting go means failing. You do not need more time. You need clarity, and clarity, the Stoics built their entire philosophy around this, does not come from the other person changing. It comes from you deciding what you will carry and what you will set down, deciding what you will make available and on what terms, deciding finally and without apology that your peace is not a negotiable item, that it is not something that can be given away in small increments across years of quiet accommodation until it is gone and you are standing in a parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon wondering when things got so heavy. Your peace belongs to you. It has always belonged to you. The Stoics are simply reminding you to take it back. We started today in a parking lot. A woman, steady hands. The quiet that arrived where she expected grief. That quiet is available to you. Not after a perfect conversation. Not after the other person finally understands. Not after the relationship has been resolved into something clean and mutual and free of the weight that has been building for years. Now, in the decision, in the honest answer to the question, what is this actually costing me? In the withdrawal of the assumption, the reduction of the availability, the held boundary, the call that is 4 months overdue. In the moment, quiet, unannounced, more ordinary than you expected, when you realize that you have set something down and your hands are steady and what you feel is not grief, is quiet. Marcus Aurelius wrote, to himself and across time, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Stop arguing with the weight. Set it down. Take care of your mind. The world will take care of itself. Until next time. If this video gave you the clarity you have been looking for, or even the beginning of it, subscribe to this channel. Next week we go deeper into the Stoic principles that help you build a life that is genuinely durably yours, one decision at a time. Subscribe now so you never miss what comes next. And if someone in your life needs to hear this today, share this video with them. Sometimes the most important thing you can give someone is the permission to set something down